Namaste, Sakshi Telugu Prajala Manasakshi. Welcome to special immigration show. Today we are back with our expert attorney Prashanthi Reddy from Law Office of Prashanthi Reddy PLLC. And if you have any questions regarding immigration, feel free to call us. Our attorney will be glad to answer your questions. And so before we begin this show, please note that the information provided on this show not a legal advice. It's just for information purpose only. So Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for this. If you need any specific legal advice, please contact the attorney directly. And today we are going to talk about how to increase chances of H1b approval and also F1 to H1 issues and QAN H1b Cap Part 2. So without any further delay, let's begin the show. Hello Prashanthi Garu, welcome to the show Andy. Good evening.
Hello Andy, good to be here.
Yes. So Prashanthi Garu, can you have any latest updates on immigration before we get into the topic?
Well, I don't think we have any latest updates this week, so let's just go dive into the topic directly,
Yes,
because
sure.
I think everybody is eager to, the topic of the day is H1b registration, and the
Yes.
H1b registration has already started as of March 9th, and it's ending as of March 25th. So I think our audience will be very eager to hear about, the do's and don'ts and, everything related to H1Bs and H1b registration.
Yes, Prashanthi. So before we get into the topic, if someone needs a specific private consultation, so can you please provide your personal information on law officers?
My number is 212-354-1010 and my email is prashanthi@reddyesq.com. Website is reddyesq.com.
Yes, let's begin this topic. And what are the issues with change of status from F1 to H1?
So yes, a lot of employers are hesitant to file change of statuses from F1 to H1 because there are some particular RFEs that we receive when we file a change of status from F1 to H1. And those RFEs or requests for further evidence relate to the person's status while they were on F1. So there's so many issues with F1 students. A lot of them have been waiting, for a couple of years now to get onto a H1 because each time they file under the H1 cap, because the supply and demand varies so much, almost 3 times the amount of people file for the H1, and a result of which they have a lottery every year. So these students, when they file for the change of status, they have only 1 out of 3 chances to be picked in the lottery. And often they don't get picked in the lottery, so they have to continue their F1 status. So because of that, they sometimes, get into trouble in the sense that they are stretching the laws. They're not breaking the laws, but they're stretching them. So they sometimes go on doing one master's degree after the other. So sometimes they're in their second master's degree, sometimes they're on their third master's degree, sometimes they're doing a PhD, just to extend their F1 status. And also what happens is since they already have a job and they're eligible to work and they don't want to lose their job, when their STEM OPT or their is expiring, then they go to a different master's and then they immediately start something called CPT, which is curricular practical training. So CPT is allowed when you're, on an F1 while you're studying. If the course requires that you also work, that's what CPT is. So it's called curricular practical training, and your job has to be related to the course. So there are a lot of questions around CPT, and always when a candidate is on CPT, we get a big RFE, a request for further evidence, asking many questions about, when did you start your CPT? Some people start on day 1. So the university has to ascertain that, the CPT is a requirement from day 1 and it's part of, the first semester courses that they're taking. And they have to show how the course is actually related to the job that they're doing. So that's another thing that has to be shown. They also have to show sometimes, because, these students are working at a different place and studying maybe at a different university. So there's often, they're in different states often. So they ask the question as to how you're commuting, how are you working and studying at the same time when you're in 2 different states? So these are all the questions that come up, and there's answers to every question, and we know how to respond to those RFEs with documentation, and we can go into that further. So, and also the question is, the universities ask, is your CPT an essential and integral part of your course? So that's, documentation has to be provided for that. So with reference to integral essential part of the course, the university has to provide a letter. With reference to, if you're working at a different place and you're studying at a different place, then you have to show how you're actually commuting. So they actually are. Sometimes, most of these universities have executive programs whereby they have all their courses, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. At one shot, the whole day they'll have courses, and that's how they cover their curriculum. So then you have to show that, airfare, or if they're driving, or, if they're taking a bus or some other kind of public transportation, you actually have to show tickets as to how you're commuting. Then you have to show, okay, once you came to your university, where are you staying? Because you don't live near your university, you live in a different campus. So they often have to show, hotel reservations. They have to show, monies, expenses that they incurred over the weekend, so that, their food, etc. So they ask for their credit card. You can show credit card bills to show expenses. Also, they want to make sure that you are not studying remote. I mean, due to COVID now, there's special there are special rules which allow you to go to school remote for foreign students, but otherwise you can only take 2 courses remote, and everything else has to be in person. So they want to make sure that you're actually taking enough in-person credits. So for that, you can show that you're actually, attendance sheets, you can show letters from the professor, you can, that you logged in. If it's remote, then, proof the screenshots that you logged in. So these are all documents that you can provide to overcome this CPT to H1 RFEs. They're all very pretty much same boilerplate. They ask the same language, same documents. So they're not very hard to overcome. You also have to show that, for example, the courses that you did, how they're related to to where you're working right now, your CPT employment. So they ask for detailed employment letters with duties. Usually we prepare a table showing the courses taken and how each course is related to the duties that they're doing. So everything requires a very specific and very detailed response. We haven't had any denial so far, luckily, unless the person, of course, did not meet the requirements on an F1. Then what happens is they approve it for consular processing. We do a review beforehand and see if we think that, they're unlikely to approve the change of status. Sometimes we ask directly for consular processing, and then we don't respond to that the RFE, with the documentation. We just say, please approve this for consular processing, and we're not responding to the documents that you're asking for because it's not relevant. So these are some of the things that you can do when a person is on CPT, and usually these are the problems that come up when a person is on CPT.
Oh, Prashanthi, so already H1 filings will start from 9th March, right? So I just want to know, what are the H1b Cap and Cap Gap?
So yeah, again, this is a student-related question again. So the H1b Cap is meant specifically for students. So what happens is you're filing the H1 6 months in advance. The actual H1 starts on October 1st. That's when the new fiscal year starts for USCIS, new financial year. So you cannot put a start date before October 1st. But you're allowed to file 6 months in advance. So you're filing, your first date of filing is April 1st. But what happens is, by the time in the interim, while you're filing and when the H1 actually starts, you have to show that until October 1st, the F1 students have maintained their status. And what happens is sometimes they're not able to because their course is completing, their OPT is completing, their STEM OPT is completing. So in that situation, they fall out of status. Previously, they used to fall out of status and we could only approve them, get their H1s approved for consular processing. They had to go out of the country, get the H1 visa stamped, and then come back in. So the USCIS has come up with a new rule, which is called the H1b Cap rule, which means that they're covering that gap, the cap gap, between April 1st and October 1st. So in that cap gap, what they're saying is whatever your status was as of the date of filing the actual H1, not the registration, but the actual H1 petition. Whatever your status was as of that date, as long as you were in status as of that date, we will consider you to be in status, in that same status until October 1st. So they gave an artificial kind of status to them. So for example, if that person was in OPT as of the date of filing, April 1st, but their OPT is, getting over in June, their OPT will automatically get extended until October 1st and they can continue working. So whatever their status was as of the date of filing, that will continue to be their status. And that's what the cap gap rule is.
Yes, we have a caller, and Prasad from Texas. Let's take the caller. Hello, Prasad. Please go on.
Hey, hi. My name is Prasad. I'm calling from a company. I just have a question related to the perm filing.
Sure.
Okay. We have initially filed 2 perms and we're filing the 3rd perm using the same PWD, where we included 5 numbers on the PWD. When you're trying to do the perm using the same PWD, it's saying the application has already been done duplicate. It's saying it's already been the perm has already been initiated. That's what the error is coming when we enter the PIN and submit. But we never ever did perm on that particular person. We never did it. But we are using the same PWD number, but the PWD number has 5 numbers on it. So we can use it for five perms, right? So I just want to know why it's coming as it's already been initiated or something, an error is coming.
That's very interesting that you should say that, because that's interesting, because we had the same issue as well at our firm. When we were trying to submit a application, we submitted 5 applications for the same person and we were submitting the 6th one. There was an error message which basically said, you're filing a duplicate. And we've always, so to answer your question, you can just ignore it if you have to be sure that you have not filed at some time before for the same person.
No, not at all.
If you have not, then you can ignore that message.
And it says, they say in the last, it says it may be it may tend to deny the perm. Because that's
right. I know that message. I've seen it. I've seen it in the past also. So that's just an error. Maybe there's another person with a similar name and the system is confused and they're treating it as a duplicate, but it's actually not a duplicate. So you can just ignore it. And to answer your question, absolutely, you can use the same prevailing wage to file any number of cases. You don't even have to mention 5 or 6 on that prevailing wage. So it really doesn't matter. You can use it as long as the prevailing wage is valid, as long as the job is the same and mirrors the duties in the prevailing wage. You can use the same prevailing wage for n number of people. You don't even have to mention the number on the prevailing wage. It doesn't matter. Even if you mention 5, you can use it for 10. If you mention 1, you can use it for 5. They only care about whether that prevailing wage has been obtained correctly or not. It's not necessary that for each individual you have to obtain a separate prevailing wage. It's the same information. So I think you can safely ignore it. I think there's some glitch in the system because I've seen that as well in a few cases.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure previously. I don't remember, but recently we had this thing. So
no, since I've been practicing for a while. Yeah, since I've been practicing for a while, I've seen it. So, I've seen it happen previously and I've seen it happen recently as well. So I think it's some kind of a glitch in the system, but nothing has changed with reference to the way perms are filed or prevailing wage or, who qualifies for a perm.
Right. Thanks for calling. And before the call, Prashanthi Garu, we are talking about cap gap, right? So what are the cap gap extensions and who is eligible for that?
So as I just said, whoever has status as of the date of that the H1 was filed, they are eligible for a H1b Cap, right? So how do you prove? The question that we should look into is how do you obtain proof that you're in Cap status? That's an important question because you need to have some proof that, you're in status. You can't stay in the country without any proof because you don't have an I-94 and it seems like you're not in status, so it's important to have some proof. So the proof here is that you have to get an updated I-20 from your university. And how do you get that updated I-20? You have to contact your DSO, your designated school official, and they'll issue, then you have to give them a copy of your H1b filing and the FedEx or whatever you use, courier services, to show that it was delivered. Because the receipt may not come immediately, and you need proof of status immediately, so you don't really have to wait for the receipt. All you need to do is give them a copy of your petition that was filed, proof of delivery, and the DSO is then will issue a new I-20, which shows that you're in cap status, and the CVIS record has to be updated. If it's not updated, then you'll be out of status. Then it's a big problem, because then to update, then go and change the CVIS record is difficult to do, right? So make sure that the DSO updates the CVIS record as well to show that you're in interim cap extension status. So that's information about how to obtain documentation to show that you're in cap and what procedure to follow.
Okay. So how long it will take to get, cap I-20 reprint?
That depends on your university. Every university is different. So, depends on how long your DSO is taking. It shouldn't be more than a week to get an updated I-20.
Okay. So, Prashanthi, how does a student covered under the cap extension obtain a proof of continuing status?
Right. We just talked about that, right? That how to obtain the status.
Yes.
We go to a DSO and we get the I-20 from them.
Yes. So my next question is, if a student was not an authorized period of OPT on the eligible date of the cap extensions, can the student work during the cap extension?
Yeah, so no, he cannot work, because whatever, as I said earlier, whatever his status was as of the date of filing the H1, that will continue to be his status. So if he did not have a valid OPT at the time of filing the cap extension, then he cannot work during the interim period of time. He's still in status, whatever his status was as of the date of filing, but he cannot actually work.
Right. We have next caller, right, Kumar. Kumar, please go on.
Yeah, hi. My name is Pankaj Kumar, and this question is regarding my spouse H4 and H4 Ead, which is filed to Nebraska Center back in May 2020. We recently got biometric done in Feb, but we haven't received the approval on our H4 Ead yet. So generally how long does it take once the biometric has been completed?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, and I'm sure you're seeing what's happening with H4 Eads. I mean, for some reason they're being intentionally put aside or not worked on. In fact, the 485 EADs are coming through very quickly. Cases filed in October, you're already getting EADs, even though there were thousands of applications filed. But the irony is that H4 EADs filed before that, and even 485 EADs extensions are getting approved, but H4 EADs are being stalled, and it's taking 8 months, 10 months sometimes to get the EAD approved. And while for other cases such as 485 EAD extensions, you can work even when it's pending, as long as you file it on time. Unfortunately, for H4 EADs, you can't even work while it's pending. You have to wait for the actual, at least for the I-797 approval, if not for the EAD card. So it's taking 8 months to 10 months, and for some people it's taking longer. Ombudsman is helping, the congressmen are helping. There are avenues to expedite requests, and they are responding to that. Not necessarily that they are doing it in every instance, but they're responding and asking for proof of the emergency. And if all else fails, you have litigation. There are a lot of group litigations going on with reference to H4 EAD delays, and if you need to be in one of those groups, I can put you into that group if you send me an email later on. So a lot of attorneys are filing class action lawsuits. So that's another avenue to think about.
Yeah, I really heard about that litigation, but I have no idea about the consequences in the future.
There are no negative consequences in the future. There are only positive consequences, or maybe it won't help at all if you lose the case. But there are no negative consequences.
But isn't it in some of the immigration form, there is a question have you ever filed a litigation case against USCIS?
No, there is no question in the I-539 form which says that.
Right, thanks for calling. So, Prashanthi ma'am, if after being granted the automatic cap gap extension, a student's H1b petition is subsequently rejected or revoked, is the student allowed to 60-day grace period?
Yes, so that's a good thing. And this scenario can happen, very easily, because when you file a change of status, you file a H1, you don't know what the result will be. Most cases do get approved, but sometimes cases get denied as well. So once the case is denied, then they want to make sure that the student doesn't automatically fall out of status. So they've given a 60 days grace whereby the student can either depart the United States, that is, leave the country, or they can file for a change of status, or they can further, extend their student status at that point. So yes, there is a 60-day grace period.
Okay. So, if a student travel outside the United States during a cap gap extension period and return in F1 status?
So the question is, can the student travel outside the United States while they're on cap gap and then, come back on an F1 status? No, it's very important to note that when you file for a change of status, any change of status, whether you're filing from a H4 to a B2 or H1 to a H4, F1 to H1, as what we're discussing right now is F1 to H1. Whenever you file for a change of status, so the answer is that yes, you can return on F1 status, but then what happens then to your cap extension? So the cap extension, that extension part of it will get denied. And your H1 part of it, they will process it. And if everything is there and they're satisfied, then they will approve the H1, but they will approve the H1 without the I-94. So they will approve the H1 for consular processing. And that portion of the extension which you've asked for change of status, rather, the change of status portion will be denied because that's the law as per 8 CFR 214.2 F13. When the person leaves while a change of status is pending, that change of status portion of the petition is denied. So please be aware that if you plan to travel, make your travel plans, postpone them for later on. After your H1 gets approved, even if it's before October 1st. For example, you can file and you can get an approval and you'll still be on an F1 until October 1st. You can still travel, you can leave and come back on an F1 before October 1st. And then after October 1st, if you leave, then you have to come back on a H1. If you come back on an F1, then again your H1 becomes invalidated. So please be careful, make your travel plans in advance and plan accordingly.
Right, thanks for the info. And we have a next caller, Praveen. Praveen, please go on.
Hi, good evening, madam. So, I have a question on regarding my wife's the biometrics. Actually, I'm on L1. We filed our extension last year September, but still for my wife, so she didn't get any biometric appointment.
So biometrics, because of COVID, cases are getting delayed. Biometrics cases are getting delayed. So it's simply because also the application support centers where they do the biometrics, those application support centers are closed, or they're sporadically open depending on which state they're in. So because of that, there's a delay in biometrics. But if it's an extension and she previously gave her biometrics, they may not send you biometrics again.
Yes, actually, she gave the biometrics in 2019 around November, when she went for stamping in India. But last year again we filed for extension in September within 1 year. That's where even I am hearing about from the my friend. So maybe I am not sure if that is the exact reason.
Yeah, so they have said that due to COVID also, they have said that they will reuse biometrics that they have already, because your fingerprints don't change. They can just run the biometrics to make sure that you have not committed a crime or, you're not a threat to national security, but your fingerprints don't change. So it seems to be pointless to keep on taking biometrics when nothing is changing with your biometrics. So yeah, they have said that they would use the previous biometrics, but USCIS is just so haphazard nowadays that they are not doing the same thing in every case. For every case, it's different. So it's on a case-by-case basis. In some instances, they're using previously issued biometrics. In some instances, they're asking for biometrics again. So it all depends on who's looking at the case, I guess. So, but that could be a very valid reason as to why you haven't received biometrics. But you can always chat with Emma, right, on USCIS website, or you can call them to find out what is the status on your case.
Okay, sure. Thank you, madam.
Good luck.
Yes, right. Thanks for calling, Praveen. And next we have another caller, Priya from Florida. Priya, please go on. Priya, can you hear me? Okay, Prashant ma'am, let's talk about H1b Visa related questions for fiscal year 2021. So how should we start planning to get an H1b Visa for this season?
You should have already started your planning because registration has already opened up, and you want to be applying at least 2 weeks before the 25th, because sometimes registration cases can get rejected. So that's what I'm telling my clients. Don't wait until last minute. File now, because even if there's a rejection, then you can refile it if the rejection comes before 25th. If you file in the last minute, the rejection will come after the 25th, then you cannot refile it. You've lost your opportunity to even have a H1 this year. You'll have to wait again until next year. So what's important right now for the H1B registration is we just need some information. We don't need everything. But if you're giving it to a lawyer, usually they will look at whether the person qualifies or not. I mean, there's no point in doing a registration for someone if they don't qualify. So they'll look at least the basic information, such as, they will ask for the degree copy, they will ask for what kind of job, what the job title is, they will do a preliminary review into whether the job, qualifies for a H1 or not. And then they will ask you for information related to the H1B registration, which is pretty much, the name of the individual, the date of birth, passport details, the passport number, and company information, such as the company address, the federal ID number of the company. You have to make sure that you open an account. That might take, a day or two. So the employer has to open an account, and then the employer has to follow this, proper steps. The employer has to select, I am a H1B registrant. The employer should not select, I am a petitioner or I am an attorney. So it's very important that they open a proper account. There are 3 different types of accounts. So they have to open an account related to I am a H1B registrant. If they open a different account, then they cannot register for the H1. It's important that they use an email address that they have not used before for a separate account. For example, last year if they had an account, and if they want to open a new account because the old account has become inactive. So that's one important thing, to make sure that your H1B account is active. And if it's not, then you can open a new account, but you have to use a separate email address. You cannot use the same email address. System will not allow you to open an account with the same email address that was already used. So very important. Remember your security questions, because if you forget your password, you have to at least remember the security questions. If you don't, then you'll be forced to open a new account. Also, I think what we have to remember, Prasanna, this time and last time as well, and every time we file a H1B registration, is there can be no duplicates. Okay. You cannot file, even by mistake, 2 cases for this, 2 registrations for the same person. That's one of the most commonly made mistakes in this H1B registration process last year. What will happen then is that both the cases will get denied. Oh. They will not even, put them through for the lottery. They will just deny them. So very important that there are no duplicates filed. There is a way of checking duplicates. The system doesn't allow you to check, but there's a way of downloading an Excel sheet And then you can check duplicates by downloading that sheet. So that option is there, but the system itself does not prompt you that you have entered a duplicate petition. So you have to be very careful.
Right.
Another important thing, Prasanna, is that the fee information, it's only $10, but if the fee doesn't go through for some reason, they will deny it, and they will not deny it now, they'll deny it after the 25th, and then you lose your opportunity.
Oh
So
my
make
God.
sure with your bank that they have no process whereby they stop funds. You may have money in your account, but maybe your bank has a system whereby they don't process it if it's from an unknown source or something like that. So you just make sure that that doesn't happen. If you're giving your credit card, same thing, call your credit card company, make sure that anything out from USCIS gets processed. So these are some important things that have to be done.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the valuable information. And I guess Priya is back to the line. Priya, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, I can. Can I ask a question now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so my husband, he's applying for EB1B, Outstanding Research category. I would like to know if you could suggest payment processing for this and if there are any negative impact on this and what is the probability of RSV. How do you see the trend in the recent EB1B category related premium fees?
That's a very good question, but I can answer it in a whole episode. That it's so comprehensive, right? The EB1 category. But I love the EB1 category, especially the researcher positions, because they're really interesting cases to file, and they're also very approvable as long as you file it properly. So yes, I think you have a good chance of getting approvals on EB1 researcher category. But then the only thing you need to show is that he's a researcher, and also you need to show that his research is in the national interest of the United States. So for example, if he's researching in the cancer field, then you have to outline exactly what research he did. And you have to show how that specific research that he did. You just can't say he's researching in cancer and therefore we know that it's useful, So you have to actually go into the details and explain the research. And if he's done anything that is, obviously when you're a scientist and you're doing research, it's always something new that you're discovering. So you have to say how that helps in cancer research. It may not cure cancer. You don't have to show that it cures cancer, but you have to show that it's a step forward in, being able to cure cancer. So one thing most important is show as many details as possible. Second thing is the more publications he has on his research, the better. Number of citations is important. If he has any patents that he's filed on his research, make sure you show that. It's important to show your letters from his peers or his superiors. And the letters that have to be given by people who are noteworthy, not just anyone. And you have to show how that person who's giving the letter, how important he is, how important he or she is, how important their research was. So their resume has to be included as well. So the more important that person, the more weight the letter that he's giving or she is giving will have, right? Then also memberships. What memberships do you have? In what organizations? How do you get those memberships? How difficult is it to become a member of that organization? So all that has to be included in your petition. You also have to show if you were a judge, or if you did peer review for any journals, or if so all this, there's so many different criteria, and everything has to be shown in detail. So it's almost like you're doing a thesis by itself. And that's what you have to submit to USCIS. And those cases are quite approvable. They might be an RFE, but if they qualify, and if also remember, you can do it two ways. You can either do a national interest waiver, which is much more difficult to do. In that case, though, you don't need an employer sponsoring you. Or you can do it through an employer, which is a regular EB1 researcher category, which is much more easier to do. You can file the I-140 through an employer, as long as that employer is a research organization. So, this is, I think, in a nutshell, your EB1 researcher category.
Yes, thanks for calling, Priya. And now next caller is Abhijit from Dallas. Abhijit, please go on. Hello? Yes, Abhijit, can you hear me? Yes, I think it's stopped. Yes, ma'am. We have another caller, Sandil from Chicago. Sandil, please go on. So, ma'am, how do we know which category we would fit and how will we qualify for an exemption?
Oh, okay. So H1b Cap Exemption, I guess we're talking about. Two different questions. One is, I guess, whether we should file in the master's cap or we should file in the bachelor's cap. So if you have a US, it's pretty simple, the answer to that. If you have a US master's degree, then you file, and if it's from an accredited university as of the time that it was issued,
Okay.
then you qualify under the master's cap. Also, another thing to keep in mind is the degree should have been from an accredited nonprofit organization, as I said, and the second thing is the degree should be related to the job. So, for example, if you have a degree in arts, right, and it's a US degree, but you're filing for an IT position, it's not related in any way. So, it has to be related, it has to be accredited, a nonprofit organization, public organization. So, as long as all this falls in place, then you can file under the master's cap. Now, with reference to your second question, what was your second question again? Sorry, Prasanna.
Yeah, that's okay. And how will we qualify for an exemption, cap exemption?
Right. Okay. Thanks. So the H1b Cap Exemption. So as we know, just to reiterate, there are 85,000 H1s issued every year.
Yes.
And for all those people who have never been on a H1 before, or who have received a H1b approval maybe but never worked on a H1 before, they have to file under the H1b Cap. So that's what H1b Cap is. All new H1s file. They're under that cap of 85,000. That's why it's called cap, because it's it's not unlimited. So you can be exempt from filing the H1b Cap if you are, number one, working for an educational institution, a higher secondary education institution like a university, etc. Or if you're working for a non-profit public organization. So not a private organization, but a public organization. So for example, to give you a good example, for example, if you're working for a hospital that is affiliated to a university as well, like NYU, New York University Hospital, or Cornell, or whatever it might be. As long as it's a teaching institute as well as a hospital, you qualify. So most doctors will qualify for an exemption. Same way research organizations, but the research organizations have to be public research organizations, so they qualify as well. So these are some examples of people who qualify for for exemption of the cap, which means that they don't have to be counted under those 85,000 numbers. But what happens is when they change their job, suppose they transfer to another H1, and now the employer no longer qualifies as a cap exempt organization, then next year they'll have to file another cap. So either they'll have to continue to work for a cap exempt organization, or they'll have to then file whenever they change. They'll be subject to the cap again. So that's one way you qualify. It could also be, yes, Prasanna. So if we don't have any callers, I will continue.
Yes, we have a caller, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, Abhijit from Dallas. Abhijit, please go on.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, Prashanthi ma'am. Thank you so much for taking this call. I have a question, actually a couple of questions on this H4 Ead versus Gc Ead question. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. All right. So the first question is that because of this October visa bulletin, now my wife and I both have this Gc Ead in hand, and we are waiting for the 180 days to be over so that we can use the AC21 job portability. So the question is, after 180 days, can I continue with my current employer on H1 and take up another job on EAD while maintaining my H1, or does it have to be all or nothing, that you have to be completely on H1 or you have to be completely on EAD? You cannot do a combination like that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You cannot do a combination. Once you either have to be on EAD, and if you move to EAD, you cannot file a change of status back to a H1. If you have to do that, then you have to actually leave the country, apply for a H1 visa, and then come back in on a H1. So you can't even file a change of status. So yes, you have to decide if you're on an EAD, then you continue to be on an EAD. You cannot have both EAD and H1 at the same time, because once you use your EAD, your status changes to that of adjustment of status, pending status, of a 485 pending status. You're not on H1 anymore.
Got it. So, okay, even if I continue with my primary employer who had filed the 485, even if I want to continue with them on H1, that is not allowed once I move to EAD, right? It has to be for all employers, it has to be EAD, including the primary one.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so that's the first question. The second question is that, if we decide to stick with the current employer and renew my wife's H4 Ead, we have recently done biometrics for the Gc Ead. So if we do the H4 extension now, do you think that Gc Ead biometrics will help in expediting the H4, or there is no link between the two and the H4 Ead will get stuck because of its own biometrics?
Yeah, so that again is varying depending on the cases. I've seen cases where even though they have just done the 485 biometrics, they're asking them again to do the H4 biometrics. Even though the USCIS has clearly said that, if you have previously done biometrics, you don't have to do it again, and we'll reuse the same biometrics, especially for extensions, because of COVID and because of the delay in getting biometrics. But I've seen that biometrics are being requested again. And as it is, H4 EADs, are, in a prolonged state of limbo. I don't know why they're doing that, but as I said to the previous caller also, there is litigation being filed. And if your H4 EAD is pending for more than 6 months, you can join in that litigation. Just contact me and I'll give you the information. And I believe some litigation that is going on is actually free of charge because it's like a class action lawsuit. So they're not going to charge each person. So yeah, definitely, if it's taking a long time, then you should litigate because there is nothing else to do. Because if you start using your 485 EAD, then the status moves to EAD, and especially if you have children, it may or may not be in your case, but if their children aging out, then they really don't want to move to a 485 EAD. They want to remain on a H4. So, and if they do remain on a H4, then they'll most probably lose their job until the EAD gets approved. So it's a terrible situation to be in.
So you're saying, sorry, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but so you're saying that in this kind of situation where you have Gc Ead in hand and trying to apply for H4 at the same time, would you just recommend then join the litigation and not use the Gc Ead because, have the H4 as backup and continue with the litigation process?
You could do that. Everybody is following a different route. Some people are comfortable just going on I-485 EAD. So if you have no children aging out, it's easier to be really on a 485, right? But as long as your I-140 is approved, make sure that the I-140 is approved. And if you don't see any reasons why your 485 will get denied, like if you've been out of status in the past, you have some kind of a criminal record, then you might be wary about changing completely to a 485 EAD. But if you don't have anything like that, you need to speak to your attorney also, I think, and make that judgment once you've spoken to them. If it's a pretty much straightforward case, then and there's no aging out issue, then there's no harm in moving to a 485 EAD.
Got it. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Hi. Thanks for calling, Abhijit. So Prashanthi ma'am, so I have a question, can we have filed for an H1b and a STEM OPT extension at the same time?
So yeah, when you file for a H1, you're filing under the cap, you're filing for a future H1 because this H1 will not start until October 1st. So in the interim, you can either use a cap or you can file. You don't need to really file for OPT extension, but you can if you want to. And yes, because one is for a future date and one is for a present date.
Okay. So my next question is, what if our original OPT expires and our cap extension data is still in pending with SEBIs? So what we have to do?
Right. So yeah, so that could be a situation. You have to stop working then in that situation and wait until your service gets updated, and then only then start working again, because you don't want to fall out of status or accrue any unauthorized work time, because that will affect then your green card moving forward. So if your service is still pending, you didn't get your I-20, new I-20 is not issued, then you should wait before you start working.
Right. Our next caller is Venkat from Hyderabad. Venkat, please go on.
Hello, Prashanthi. Thank you for taking my call. I had a couple of
Venkat.
questions with regard to H1. One of my friends has been laid off while being on H1. So is that 60-day grace period strictly enforced?
Yeah, the 60-day grace period is enforced, yes.
Because of the pandemic?
But, I'm sorry?
Because of the pandemic, is it like, do they do it by case-by-case basis?
Well, are you asking me if you get more than 60 days? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. You're unlikely to get more than 60 days. The question, of course, sometimes is calculating when your last date was. Because you could be, it's not the last date in the office, but it's the last date as per your paycheck, right? So it's important to calculate it correctly as to when is the last date officially. And then, yes, the 60-day grace period is really, is written in stone. And after that, if they want to, under nunc pro tunc, something called nunc pro tunc, which is humanitarian grounds, which always existed, COVID or no COVID, they might still consider your application beyond the 60 days also. But you're taking a chance, because that now you're at the mercy of the officer. So I would instead file for a change of status. If you're exceeding the 60 days, file a change of status to a B2 and then move back, to a H1 once, you are able to find that new job if you're going beyond the 60 days. And don't just stay out of status, because then you're dependent completely on the officer.
Hello?
Do we have to go for consular processing if we change our status?
Yeah, so then if you go beyond the 60 days, then you should leave the country before that 60 days expires if you're not filing a change of status. If you're filing a change of status, you don't have to do consular processing, because it's called bridging. You're filing a bridge between one H1 and the other. So even if that B2 doesn't actually get approved, it is still in pending status. You can still again file for, your H1 while that B2 is pending.
Inside the country.
Correct.
While doing all this.
Correct.
And I have one more hypothetical question. What if I was filing within the 60 days and if the H1 gets rejected? Like, can I file one more H1 or like how does that work?
If you pass the 60 days, you cannot. If you are within the 60 days, you can file as many H1s as you want.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right. Thanks for calling. And next we have another caller, Venkat from New Jersey. Venkat, please go on.
Yeah. Hi, Ms. Prashanthi. This is Venkat from
Hi.
New Jersey. So currently, I have a 485 approved EAD, and it's been more than 6 months I applied my H4 EAD. So basically, the thing is, first I applied my H4 EAD in the month of July, and meanwhile the dates got current, and then I applied 485 EAD. So my 485 EAD is Gc Ead is already approved, but the H4 EAD is still pending. So what will happen to the H4 EAD once this Gc Ead is approved? I mean, that will be cancelled, or how does it work?
No, it's not cancelled. It's a separate application, so they will continue to process it.
Okay, so it's going to take time, but it's going to get approved, right? So that this
Correct.
is not linked with H4 EAD.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Nothing else.
Yes, right. Thanks for calling. And I have a question, ma'am. So can a foreign national file more than one petition to get a H1b visa this year?
Yes, so that's what we were talking about, duplicate filings. So while a beneficiary or an employee can file more than one H1 through different employers, the same employer cannot file two H1s for the same employee.
Okay.
So as long as you have different companies and you have different jobs from each company, it shouldn't be the same job. So different jobs, different companies, yes, you can file more than one H1, and a lot of people do that because to increase their chances in getting into the cap. That's quite common for one person to file more than one H1. But remember, if it's the same job and two different employers are filing it, both H1s will get cancelled. So make sure that you don't do that.
Okay. Okay. Last date for H1B filings, I think 25th March, right?
For the registration, correct.
Yes. So can you share few H1B filing tips with our viewers?
So the registration tips is as we were talking through sporadically throughout this the episode. Don't file duplicates. Make sure that your registration is active. So go in, log in. Don't presume that it'll be active. Make sure that you save your password somewhere. Save the secret questions. If you're opening a new account because your registration has become inactive, make sure you use a different email address. Make sure that if different people are entering your registration, it's one company, large company, and you have different HR people entering it, duplications can happen. So you can download your entire list into an Excel sheet and check for duplications. That's what even USCIS has recommended to be done. So that's important as well. In addition to that, the passport number. Make sure you always enter the passport number, even though the passport number is not always compulsory. Enter it, because if there are two people with the same names, the system might look at it as a duplicate and then just deny both the petitions, even though they're two different people.
Yes.
So they distinguish it via the passport number. So make sure you enter the passport number, whether it's a required field or not.
Yes.
Don't make any mistakes when you're entering. Typographical errors cannot be fixed once the case is submitted. So make sure you enter the correct information. I think, this is some information that is useful.
Thanks for the tips, ma'am. And we have another caller, Nitin from Georgia. Nitin, please go on.
Hey, hi. Yeah, I had a question. It's a little complicated. Maybe, you'd be able to understand the situation. But so I was on H1B for almost 6 years. I exhausted my 6 years. After that, I went on H4 Ead, and I was working with an employer for almost 3 years on H4 Ead from 2018 to 2021. And we have obviously applied for the extension, and it's because of the delays and all that, it's taking quite a while. My question is, if I want to switch back to H1B, do I have to, leave the country and stay outside for 1 year, or, I can just, within this time period, my employer can file an H1B? I was not clear about that. So if you can please let me know what can I do in case this H4 Ead is getting delayed, and if I can switch back into H1B.
Yeah, so pretty much the H1B, I presume that you have completed your 6 years on H1, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so then if you've completed the 6 years, you either have to have a labor cert or a green card pending or I-140 approved, or you have to leave the country for a period of 1 year. And then you can re-enter under the, next year's H1b cap. So it's important that you know that you have to leave the country in order to get a fresh 6 years on your H1. Or you have to have a labor cert or a green card approved. Labor cert or an I-140 approved.
Firm and, I-140 is approved. So that's why, I'm working on H4 Ead currently.
Okay, so if your I-140 is approved, then you can file for a H1, and you do not have to file under the cap. You're eligible to file, you're not subject to the cap.
But that's not my I-140, that's my spouse's I-140, is that okay?
Okay, so then you're subject to the cap. If it's not your I-140.
Okay.
Right. Thanks for calling, and thank you so much, Prashanthi Reddy, for spending your valuable time here. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. It's a pleasure
Thank you.
meeting you.
Good night.
Yes. That's all for now. Stay tuned to Sakshi, Telugu Prajala Mana Sakshi. Namaste.